and welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'll be sharing 5 new fall DIYs with a little help from my Cricut Maker. By using my Cricut Maker, I was really able to customize each one of today's projects. I do want to thank Cricut so much for sponsoring today's video. Now let's go ahead and jump right into today's DIYs. For DIY number 1, I'm going to be making a no-sew fall pillow. For this one, I pulled up my Cricut Design Space and I'm starting out by selecting image on the left-hand side, and then I'm typing the word pumpkin in at the top. Now this is going to pull up so many different words that say pumpkin and also pumpkin images. Now I'm going to be using this pumpkins word. I really like this font, so that's the one that I chose. And then I'm just going to scroll down and look through the pumpkin images and select the one that I'm going to be using, which is this one here. Once I have my 2 images selected, I went to insert image. Now it has my word and my pumpkin image on my canvas, and I'm just going to resize those and move them around a little bit exactly where I want them. To resize them, I just went to the lower right hand side and moved that around to make it smaller or my image larger. After I have these images all resized and placed where I want them to be, I'm then going over to the left hand side and selecting text and typing in the words farm fresh. I'm also going to be changing the font for these words, and that's at the top left hand side. Cricut Design Space has so many different fonts to choose from. I've already made this image, so I know that I like the Baskerville font, so I just typed that in the corner just to pull it up a little faster. But if you scroll through the design space on all of the fonts, there is just so many to choose from, and that's probably what takes me the longest when I'm creating anything. I take forever to find a font that I really like because there's so many to choose from. Next, I'm going to be making my words farm fresh have a curve to them, so I'm selecting where it says curve on the top right hand side and then just moving that dot over to the right a little bit until I get the curve shape that I want. Then I'm just resizing the words once again and just kind of moving my images around to have them exactly where I want them to be and have everything nice and centered. I'm also going to be adding an arrow to this design, so I'm going back into my images in Cricut Design Space and I'm just typing arrow in so that it will pull up all of the arrows in Cricut Design Space. Once I see one that I like, I'm just selecting it and pressing insert image on the bottom right hand side. And again, just resizing that arrow to the size that I want, and I'm placing it underneath the word pumpkins. I'm also going to be adding the words open daily, so I'm just going back to text, typing the word open daily in. And for this one, I am going to be using a script font. And if you've ever used Cricut Design Space, then you know that the script fonts, all of the letters for the words are spaced apart, so you do need to put them together. To do that, I'm selecting Ungroup from the top right-hand corner, and then it's making all of the letters individual so that I can move each letter around on their own. I'm then just bringing each letter together so that it has a nice flow and there's no spaces between the letters. I do have a space between the words open daily because those are words. And then I'm going to select both of the words, and then I'm going to the bottom right-hand corner where it says weld, and I'm selecting that. Now that's going to make open daily be one image on its own. I'm then just moving that above the word, or not the word, the arrow, and I just resize that a little bit smaller. I'm then highlighting the entire image, and I'm going back down to the right hand corner and selecting weld, and that is making this entire design that I made all one piece. Since this is an iron-on, I'm making sure to mirror my image before cutting it out. Anytime you're doing an iron-on, you always want to make sure that it's mirrored so that it goes properly when you put it on to whatever you're making. I'm just placing it into my Cricut machine and I'm letting it do its thing and cut the image out. And I am using the matte black everyday vinyl. Next, I'm taking the 12 by 12 sheet that I cut out on my vinyl, and I'm just going to be using this as a guide to help me cut out my fabric for my pillow. So I'm just leaving a space around all 4 sides so that I have a little bit of extra fabric around the design once I make my pillow. So once I have that all measured out, I'm just cutting that square out for my pillow with my scissors. The fabric that I'm using is from Joann Fabrics. And before cutting it out, I did make sure to fold my fabric over so that I cut out 2 sheets at the same time. And since I had it folded, I just needed to make sure to cut the folded side as well. I am using my Cricut Easy Press Mini for this project, and I'm setting it to a medium heat setting. I'm then cutting a piece of this Ultra Bond tape down to size so that it will fit on one side of what's going to be my pillow. And I am facing the Ultra Bond tape adhesive side down. As you can see here, I did stack my 2 pieces of fabric so that what's going to be the outside of my pillow is facing inward, and I flipped that top piece of fabric down so that it's easier for me to iron the adhesive on. Then I'm taking my mini press and I'm placing it right over top of the adhesive tape for about 2 or 3 seconds in each area on the tape so that the adhesive sticks to that bottom piece of fabric. Once I have that all ironed on, while it's still hot, I'm peeling back the tape and the adhesive is now onto my fabric. I'm then placing that second piece of fabric back on top of that area where the adhesive is, then taking my mini press again, and then I'm just placing that over top of each area where the tape is for probably about 8 seconds each, and just doing that until the entire side is bonded together. I continued that same step for 2 more sides, and then the last side, I'm only cutting my tape to fit half of the side because I still need an opening to place all of my stuffing for my pillow, but I'm still doing the same steps as I did to the other 3 sides, only this time I just did it halfway. After I have all of my sides bonded together, I'm then flipping my pillow cover inside out. Now moving back to the vinyl that we already cut out earlier in the video, I'm peeling back the excess vinyl from my design. And for the everyday vinyl, this is by far the easiest vinyl for me to remove from my design. It's more of like a rubbery texture than the other vinyls that you use, but I actually really enjoy peeling back this vinyl. And I'm also going to be using my weeding tool that came with my Cricut Maker to get all of the little pieces of vinyl out between all of my letters and my pumpkin. Now that I have my iron-on image all ready to go, I'm setting my Cricut Easy Press 2 to 330 degrees, and then I'm also setting the timer to 30 seconds. Now on Cricut's website, they have an entire heat guide for the Easy Press 2, and for the cotton fabric that I'm going to be using for my everyday vinyl, this is the temperature and the amount of time that it recommends. Once my Easy Press has reached the 330 degrees, I'm then placing it on the front side of my pillow cover for about 5 seconds to get any of the wrinkles out and also to get any moisture that's in my fabric out. You may not think that your fabric has moisture in it, but it does. And on the Cricut website, it recommends doing this before placing on your iron-on. Next, I'm centering my design onto the front of my pillow cover. I'm then taking my Easy Press 2 and I'm placing it onto the top of my design, then starting that 30-second timer. And since my image is a little bit bigger than the surface of my iron, I just have to move it around a little bit and then restart the 30-second timer for each area of my design. Once I have the front side of my cover all ironed on, I'm then flipping my pillow cover over, and then I'm resetting the timer on my Easy Press to 15 seconds, and I'm going to be going over each area on the back side of my design for an additional 15 seconds, and this is also recommended on the Cricut website. After my pillow cover has cooled down quite a bit, I'm then peeling off the plastic top part of my iron-on. And now it's time to start filling the pillow cover. For this, I'm using polyfill, and I picked this large bag up at Hobby Lobby for $2.99, and I'm only going to be using about a quarter of the bag. The hole that I left in the very top of the pillow cover is where I'm going to be filling all of my polyfill. I'm taking small amounts of the polyfill at a time, probably about a handful, and then I'm placing it into the pillow cover, and then I'm just pressing it down to the bottom and working my way up until I have my pillow cover all filled. For the last step, I'm cutting another piece of the heat and bond tape to the size of the hole that I left in the very top of my pillow cover, and I'm doing the same steps to close that hole up as I did before with the heat and bond tape. Here is my no-sew fall pillow all finished. This was such an easy project, and I'm so happy I was able to customize my own design for my pillow using my Cricut Maker and Cricut Design Space. I do have this pillow placed outside just for the video. This is not an outdoor pillow. Now moving into DIY number 2, I'm making a custom fall mug. For this project, I already have my design made ahead of time, but I'll give you a little overview of how I created it. I went into a blank canvas in my design space, and then for the words I love and most of all, I just created text and changed the fonts. Then for the leaf, the word fall, and the pumpkin, I found in images on the design space. I then highlighted them all together once I had them placed where I wanted, and then welded them all together to make one image. Then it was all ready for me to cut out onto my vinyl. Since I'm making a custom mug and I want my design to stay on my mug, I am using a permanent vinyl for this project. I really love using the permanent premium Cricut vinyl for projects that I really want the vinyl to stay on. Any outdoor projects that I've done and I've used vinyl, I always use this permanent premium vinyl. It is perfect for outdoors because it is water and UV resistant. Once the Cricut Maker is all finished cutting out my vinyl, I'm then weeding my vinyl using my Cricut tool that came with my Cricut Maker. Next, I'm applying my Cricut transfer tape over top of my design and then using my Cricut scraper tool to press my design onto the tape. Once I have my design pressed really well on the tape, I'm then peeling it back, and as you can see here, my design is now transferred to the tape. Before I place my design on the side of my mug, I put rubbing alcohol on a cotton pad and I'm just wiping off the sides of the mug to ensure that they're nice and clean so that my vinyl sticks to the mug really well. Next, I'm placing my design on the side of my mug and then just making sure that the vinyl is pressed down really well. I'm also using my scraper tool to press down on the vinyl to make sure that it gets transferred. Since everything is now all transferred, I'm then peeling off my transfer tape. Next, I'm going to be applying this dishwasher safe Mod Podge. Now this is actually the first time I'm ever using this, but I thought it sounded really great to put over top of my vinyl to ensure that I can use it in the dishwasher, and then my vinyl is going to stay on here forever, hopefully. So I just painted on a really thin coat and I'm just letting that dry. Now the only thing about this is it does say that the Mod Podge takes 28 days to cure. So if you're going to be making this for a gift or something, I would definitely do it ahead of time. But knowing that this is going to be dishwasher safe and my vinyl is going to stay on, I still think it's a really great product. And here is my custom fall mug all finished. I think this one turned out so cute, and I know that it'll be getting a ton of use since I am a huge coffee drinker. Now moving on into DIY number 3, I'm making a felt fall wreath. For this one, I opened up the blank canvas in my Cricut Design Space and I went over to images and I typed in fall leaves. Now this is going to bring up any fall leaves or words that say fall, all fall related stuff pretty much in the Cricut Design Space. And I'm going to be choosing the first leaf that came up in my Cricut Design Space, and I'm inserting that leaf image onto my blank canvas. Now I'm just resizing that leaf to the size that I want, and then I'm going to be duplicating it several times onto my canvas because I want the same leaf cut out onto the felt fabric that I'm going to be using. I'm just going to be using several of these leaves in my project. So I'm cutting out as many as I can for each color felt that I'm using in my project. Once I have my leaves all placed on my canvas exactly how I want them to be when I cut them out, I do need to make some changes. So I am going for the materials that I'm using. I'm just typing the word felt and it should pull it right up. So I'm selecting felt, and then for the tool that I'm going to be using, I'm changing that to my rotary blade. And since I am using the rotary blade, I'm just switching out from my fine point blade to my rotary blade. This one has little teeth on it. You just want to make sure they line up before you lock the blade in place. I did end up using 4 different colors of felt for this project, and I cut them out exactly the same. I just repeated the process over and over for each color of felt. By using my Cricut Maker, it made it so much easier to cut these leaves out and so much quicker as well. I know that all of my leaves are exactly the same. While my Cricut Maker was cutting out all of my felt leaves, I then started making my wreath, and I attached some of this burlap ribbon from Dollar Tree onto this wreath form that I also picked up from Dollar Tree, and I started by just wrapping it around over and over again, and I did hold the ribbon tight so that I didn't have any big gaps in the ribbon, and this is just going to help the felt stay on the burlap a little bit better than it would have with just that foam wreath form. Next, I'm going to be shaping all of my leaves. I did want them to have some sort of shape to them instead of just being flat. So to do that, I'm placing a little bit of hot glue about a quarter of the way down on the thicker side of the leaf and then just folding it in half over the glue. I did have to hold them in place until the glue dried. Once I had them all glued, I then started gluing each leaf onto my wreath form, and I really didn't have any specific way on how I was doing this. I just knew that I wanted them all to be facing the same direction, and then I just switched between the colors when gluing them on, and I continued that same step over and over again until I had all of the leaves glued on. And I did get all of my felt at Hobby Lobby, and I did use 4 different colors. I used a cream color, the yellow, like golden color. I used more of a purple, and then also more of like a burgundy color as well. And I believe the sheets of felt there are 33 cents a piece. Now that I have all of my leaves glued on, I'm then taking some of this berry garland that I picked up from Dollar Tree not too long ago, and I'm randomly wrapping it around my entire wreath. I'm also using this metal thankful word from Dollar Tree in the center of my wreath, and to attach it, I'm just wrapping the berry garland around the word T and then also the word L at the end. This seemed to hold the word on a lot better than trying to glue it on because the hot glue was not wanting to stick on the metal or the felt. For the last step, I'm creating a hanger for my wreath. I'm using this white cotton cord from Hobby Lobby. I created a loop with a knot, and then I just glued that right onto the top portion on the back side of my wreath. And as you guys can see here, I did not put leaves on the back of my wreath because it will sit better on my wall without having leaves on it. Here is my felt fall wreath all finished. This project was so easy to do. Anybody could do this project, and it was even easier for me to do because I had my Cricut Maker to help me out. Now for DIY number 4, I'm making a Hello Fall sign. For this one, I already have my design made, but an overview of how I made it is I went into text and typed in the word hello and then just switched up the font. And then I found my fall word in images and my Cricut Design Space. I knew that Design Space already had a lot of fall words with really cute font. So instead of going through all of the fonts for me to try to find one, I just picked one that they already had. Then I highlighted the 2 words together and welded them together. I then needed to make some changes for when I cut out my design. So I'm going into the materials and I'm just finding the brushed cardstock because that's what I'm going to be cutting my words out onto today. Before I start cutting out my image, I do want to show you guys that I did end up going in the Cricut Design Space and finding a hello script word instead of the one that I had on the last image. I thought it just looked a little bit better than just the plain hello. So this again is the one that I found in the Cricut Design Space. It was already made. Here is my Cricut Maker cutting out my design on the brush cardstock. Once it's all cut out, I'm just peeling back the extra cardstock, and then I'm using my weeding tool to get out all of the material in the little spots of the letters and the F, the L, the A. And then again, the same thing with the hello script word that I cut out. To actually make this project, I'm using a Dollar Tree pumpkin sign, and I'm going to be using the back of the sign. I just took the jute hanger out of it, and then I'm also removing the leaf that's on the sign as well. And then I'm painting the entire back side of the pumpkin with my Waverly chalk paint in the color Ivory, and I did have to do 2 different coats of paint for this. I then used my folk art chalk paint in the color Castle on a small paintbrush, and I painted around all of the outside edges with this color, and then also like naturally where there would be the grooves in a pumpkin. And what made it really easy for me to paint was the little cutouts on the bottom of the pumpkin that were already there. And then I also used that same folk art chalk paint in the color Castle to paint my stem. To give my pumpkin a little bit more dimension, I went in with the Waverly chalk paint in the color Hazelnut on a small paintbrush, and I very lightly painted that color over all of the spots that I did the castle color for the grooves of the pumpkin and then all around the outside edges. For the metal leaf that originally came on the pumpkin, I'm painting that with a Waverly chalk paint in the color Merlot, and I did do 2 coats of this paint on the leaf. While my leaf was drying, I then started painting on matte Mod Podge on the back side of both of my words, fall and also hello. Then I placed the words on the front center of my pumpkin, and I pressed the words down, and then I used some more of that matte Mod Podge to paint over top of the front of the word, and I used my fingers to press the word down onto the pumpkin, and then I would brush more Mod Podge on so that it would stick really well on the pumpkin, and then I let it sit for about 15 minutes to dry. To make my stem have a little bit more detail, I ended up painting on my folk art chalk paint in the color Java, and I used a small paintbrush for this. I used the paint a little bit in the middle and then around all of the outside edges of the stem. What would be a fall sign without some raffia? I'm using some strands of raffia from Dollar Tree to make a really simple bow, and then I'm just shaping it down to the size that I want it to be and then cutting off the bow ends. I'm also adding back on this metal leaf that I've already painted in the Merlot color. I just placed it around the back, and then to hold the stem in place, I did end up putting some hot glue all around it and then just holding it down until the glue dried. And then I placed a little bit more glue underneath the actual leaf on the front side. I thought it would be really cute to add some of this berry garland from Dollar Tree, so I wrapped it around the stem twice, and then I just started turning it a little bit so that I would have some loops coming down from the stem, and then I also did that for a second piece. To hold them into place, I just flipped over my pumpkin and I placed some hot glue around the back stems of the berry garland. Next, I'm adding my raffia bow to the top of my sign using some hot glue. For the last step, I'm adding some more jute through the pre-drilled holes that were originally in the sign, just tying those off to the length that I want them to be, and that's it. Here is my Hello Fall sign all finished. I love that I was able to create this using my Cricut Maker and also using some really affordable items from Dollar Tree. And now for the fifth and final DIY today, I'm making a Hello Pumpkin rug. And I first went into my design space because I need to make the stencil for my rug. So I chose a square shape, and then I just unlocked that so that I could make it into a rectangle shape for my stencil. Once I had that all set, I then went to text and I typed the word hello. And then I changed that to the font that I want for my stencil. Choosing a font takes a very long time. Like I said before, it's like the longest process for me. I'm not sure why. And then once I had the hello word right where I want it to be, I then went into text again and typed in the word pumpkin. Now the word pumpkin that you see me do here, I'm going to be changing the font, but it's not going to be the one exactly on the stencil that I'm using because I could not find that same font in Design Space that I used originally when I already made the stencil. But again, you guys see I'm using a script font like I did in one of the last DIYs, but we need to place all of the letters together. So I'm ungrouping the letters on the right top hand side and then just moving each letter over so that they are connected. Once I have them all connected the way I want them to be, I'm just gonna be highlighting just the word pumpkin. I am gonna move my background so I can do this. I'm highlighting the word pumpkin, and then I'm going on the lower right-hand side and I'm welding it together and then just resizing that once it's all welded. Then I'm going into images in my design space and I'm typing in pumpkin, and I'm choosing a pumpkin from the Cricut designs that I want to use on my stencil, and then I'm just resizing that, and then I want one the exact same size, so I just duplicated that, and then I duplicated another one, only this other one I'm making a little bit smaller. Once I had that one resized smaller, I duplicated that as well, so I have two larger and two smaller. And then highlighting the entire image that I've created, and I'm welding that together to be one image. And then placing my rectangle background back over top of my image, highlighting all of that, and then selecting slice in the lower right hand side. This is gonna slice out my image so that I now have a stencil, and then I'm just Xing out of the other images. For my stencil, I am cutting it out on white everyday vinyl. I know that Cricut does make a stencil vinyl. I did not have any, so I'm just using my regular everyday vinyl. After my design was all cut out on my vinyl, I then started weeding out all of the extra vinyl. And for this, I used my really handy Cricut tool that came with my Cricut Maker. And I actually really like doing this part. It is almost my favorite part of the projects. I don't know why, but I think this is just a really fun. Once I had everything all weeded out, I then took a large sheet of transfer tape and placed it over top of my entire stencil, and then used my Cricut scraper to press the transfer tape onto my design really well. I then started to peel back the backing of my vinyl, and I did have to use my weeding tool a little bit as I peeled the transfer tape off. Some of my words were not wanting to stick on the tape, but I think it's because I was working on a card table, which wasn't like a super hard surface for me to press down on. But either way, I got it all off just fine. Then I placed my stencil in the center of this rug that I picked up from Home Depot. It was $9.99. And then I started peeling back the transfer tape. Now the easiest way I found to do this is to just peel back some of the tape a little bit and then place the painter's tape down. Because this is on a rug with texture, it doesn't stick, or the vinyl doesn't stick all the way to the rug. So you have to use painter's tape or some kind of tape to hold the stencil in place. So I just taped it around all four sides, and then I used my Dollar Tree stencil brush with acrylic wrought iron colored paint, and this is the Folk Art brand that I'm using. Now, if you have an outdoor paint, that is gonna work best. I did not have any on hand, but I highly suggest using an outdoor paint if you're gonna be making a rug. When stenciling this paint on, I did it the same as I would when stenciling on, let's say, a wood surface. I just put a small amount of paint on and then just dabbed it. But some of the inside letters, like the K and the O, those I had to put back into place. So I'm just holding those in place so that they don't move around, since they're not actually attached to the stencil. Once all of my paint was dry, I then peeled back all of my vinyl. And then, since this is an outdoor rug, I wanted to make sure that I put a sealer down. So I'm using the Rust-Oleum Matte Clear Protective Sealer, and I just sprayed a couple of coats of the sealer over top of my rug to protect it. And here is my custom Hello Pumpkin fall rug. I think it turned out super cute, and it was really easy to create. I had so much fun creating all of these fall DIYs using my Cricut Maker, and I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up and share it. It really helps out my channel. If you're not subscribed, I hope that you will consider subscribing. Please be sure to hit the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future videos. Thank you again so much to Cricut for sponsoring today's video. Thank you so much for watching.